Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. I'm Kevin Bille, and as always, we appreciate you joining us here today. Well, it's a new season, and I am excited today. We've got an awesome guest, former head women's basketball coach at University of Oklahoma. She's a Hall of Famer, Sherri Coale. Coach, it's great to have you.
Thank you, Kevin. Great to be here.
Really looking forward to this. I got to know, like, how's retirement? What are you up to these days?
Retirement is fantastic. I tell people it's a great gig if you can get it. I tell you what, I'm having an awesome time. It's just a good season of life. I think that means that I was ready for it and the timing was right. But I have a new granddaughter who's 8 months old now, and that's a ton of fun. They live close, so I get to see her often. I'm writing. I have a website, just sherricoale.com. I have a blog, a weekly blog that goes out, and a monthly newsletter. And I'm doing some public speaking, motivational speaking, doing a little bit of consulting, and playing some tennis and jogging in the neighborhood, and generally loving every day.
That's great. That's great. And your record's 0-0 right now, so everything is good, right?
Undefeated.
Hey, Sherri, I'd love you just to tell us right off the bat, why did you coach? Like, what did you truly love about it?
Well, I got into it. I think the reason most people get into it, the most influential people in my life, beyond my immediate family, have been my teachers and my coaches. And I thought my fifth grade basketball coach hung the moon. And then I thought my college coaches hung the moon. And it was just the people that I most admired and respected were in this profession. And it seemed like a great way to make a living, being in a gym with a orange leather ball in your hand all day and wearing tennis shoes. It's just fantastic. Yeah. And, quickly you get addicted to the relationships and to the difference you can make. I love the game too, Kevin. I can't leave that out. I love the game of basketball. I love the angles and the spacing and the importance of momentum and timing and strategizing and teaching. I love all that stuff. And so it was just sort of a perfect mix for me. And when I graduated from college, I just thought I would be a high school coach. I had no aspirations of being a college coach. I wanted to teach English and coach basketball, and that's what I did.
Right. Yeah. I also, one thing I got to throw in there is I love basketball because it's like you can make a mistake and 1 second later you can make up for it. That's you don't get that in a lot of other sports. I've heard you say, I love the what drives winning. I know we were talking about, Brett and Becky beforehand. I love the videos on there. One thing I've heard you say that, man, I really related to is how important it is for a coach to find their own voice. Tell me how one does that. And maybe you could even talk about the question, because I think that question of what's my measurement going to be is a great tool, whether it's a coach listening or any type of leader trying to find their voice.
Well, I think first of all, you don't find it unless you live your way toward it for a while. I don't think that you can decide coming in, this is going to be my voice, and then you walk out and that's it. I think you kind of got to live your way toward it, because there are so many voices that make up who you are as a person and a coach. Most of us, we come out and we want to coach the way we were coached because it's what feels right to us, and it's what worked. And I remember my first job as a head high school coach, and the boys coach there at the high school was unbelievable. They had an undefeated season and won a state championship, and he was amazing. Incredible teacher, incredible disciplinarian, but he did it his way. And for a while, I was a little bit like him, and it didn't quite fit. It was like a jacket that didn't fit exactly right. And so I had to kind of live my way through that. And I became sort of a combination of a lot of different people who had been my coaches or coaches I had been around and worked alongside. And so I think part of it is life experience along the way, but there's also an intentional element to it. Obviously, I think a very important question that I learned to ask myself was, what does it feel like to be coached by me? And, as a coach, there are days when you're like, oh, that must have felt awful. I wouldn't have wanted to be coached by me today. We're not perfect, obviously, and we're going to have those moments. But I think asking that question to yourself, sort of pushes and nudges you back in the lane that you choose to be in. And that's that intentionality. And for all of us, I mean, we want to be more process driven than we are outcome driven. And that's who you are as a coach, and what your voice is has to align with that as well. So there are a lot of factors that roll into that. And I think there's a little bit of time required to kind of season it and make it mature.
Yeah, that's interesting. How would you say, I mean, how hard is it to truly be yourself and not emulate these other people though? Because I see a lot of people trying to do that. Is it because they just want instant success in terms of the left-hand column of those wins, or is it because of the bottom line? Like, how hard is that for people, and why can't they be themselves?
Oh, I think it's a little bit of that. I think it's also always easier to model yourself after something than to be original. It's just, there's a lot of risk involved with originality. You don't know. It hasn't been tested and tried and proven. And I think too, it's easy to watch Mike Krzyzewski and say, oh, he's won 800 million games. I'll just do it like he does it. And I think the most important thing for a coach is to be authentic, because your players sniff that out. If you're trying to be someone that you're not, or you're trying to be a personality or persona that's not actually authentic and organic to you, they're going to feel that, and they're not going to want to follow that. And I think it is hard, Kevin. I think the external pressures of the world really, especially for young coaches, really apply some sharp corners. If you look at what's happening right now in the world of college football, I've never in my life seen football coaches fired in the middle of the season for not winning games, for not being successful enough. It's crazy. I watched a college game this weekend in which the interim coach was coaching and the new coach was on the sideline, but he wasn't coaching yet. And I'm like, how does that even happen? And for an athlete to be in that environment, how is that possibly conducive for their best success? And so with those things are going on around you, I think it takes a very, very strong-willed and I think mentored and anchored head coach to be able to be true to their voice. And by that, I mean somebody from the outside who's saying, oh, you're not being you right now, get it back in the lane a little bit, because the world will zap you real quick if not.
Yeah, I just want to add one other thing in there and then ask you a follow-up question. I think vulnerability is another thing that I wish more leaders could have. And I know that sometimes is tough because of, like you said, if you're not getting results, you're not putting yourself out there. But you mentioned something that's really important, having a coach. Like, how I look at myself now, kind of in the same world as you. It's like I have someone, I have a coach, I have an accountability partner. I don't know how I would do this without them. Why are so many coaches, why are they not reaching out and getting those? And I'm sorry to make this long-winded. I remember, in fact, I think you might have been, you were at the Florida clinics with Chiat and those guys.
Oh yeah.
I feel like we met down there once, but anyhow, there was and I don't know if this was a specific one, because I went there like 5 years in a row, but somebody was saying, like, you literally spent, like, as a coach, 10% of your time coaching. But yet it's like we were always going to clinics. We were always doing all these other things. But why aren't they getting people to focus on the other 90% that really truly does impact the 10% of the coaching?
Kevin, that's a great question. It might be the $65 million question. But I think if I were an athletic director right now today, I don't think I would give my coaches a choice. I think I would mentor them toward, all right, this is the team you need to build around you. You can put whoever in whatever seat you want, but you need somebody with this type of experience. You need somebody who's out in this venue. You need this collection of foxhole folks who are going to help you along the way. Because what we know most about is ball, and yet that's what we spend all our time trying to learn is more ball. And then those are rarely the things that get you. If you look at almost any team dysfunction, it's almost always due to some sort of human behavior issue.
Yes,
when human behavior issues are quiet, when there's great camaraderie and just a great environment, teams typically overachieve.
Mhm.
And when they underachieve, it's typically because of those other things. And so people to help assist with those are incredibly important. I think not only first time head coaches, but I think old head coaches too, because
Right.
we get stale and we get disconnected. And so you might need a different set of foxhole folks for different levels and different
Um,
prongs in your career. But I just think that circle you surround yourself gives you the best possible chance for success.
that's really good. And I don't know about you, but it's like as a coach, we just are always telling people what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and it's like I'm now with like my kids will be walking around the house saying something. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's, and it's like I just look back and I think, man, it's just, you just need more people in your life like that to be truth tellers and to tell you the things that, as you would tell players, maybe you don't want to hear this, but you need to hear this, right? And so I think that's important. I want to talk about your press conference, your retirement press conference. I'm weird. I like to watch post game conferences and some of those. And when I knew we were going to speak, I had to listen to it. You said something. This is a comment that it struck me, but probably diving a little bit deeper and knowing you, it didn't. But I think it would strike a lot of people. You said there are more important things than winning. I'd like you just to dive into that a little bit more and tell us what you meant by that, please.
Well, obviously, I think the higher the level you go, the bigger the platform, the larger the dollar of the income, all of those things. Um, Take winning and slide it right to the middle, and it's this huge, enormous thing that sits right in front of you every single day. And I think sometimes when you maybe coach at different levels, it's still larger than it needs to be, but it doesn't slide maybe quite as much to the middle as it does when you're at a really, really high profile. And I think it's a hard thing to balance and to get back in even keel, if you will. The reason coaching is even important, and the reason sports even matter at all, is because of the lessons that you can learn through them that make you a better human being and thus make the world a better place to live in. It's not, if it's not for that, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to even do it. So you have to find a way, I think, to make sure that the main thing stays the main thing. And the main thing is, are people learning and growing as a result of the chase toward this outcome? And whether you get it or not becomes irrelevant. It's who you become as a result of that participation. And that's really hard. I think for me as a coach, gosh, I have suffered many times over for players I felt like I couldn't reach or didn't do a good job with in terms of helping them grow. That haunts me way more than any game I ever lost.
Yeah.
Way
Amen.
more.
Amen to
Because
that.
that's the stuff that really matters.
Hmm. Well, how do you get a group of kids? How do you get a staff? How do you get all those people to buy into that when maybe that's not what they're aligned with or what they've been like for 18 years coming into your program, and it's like they just want to win or they want to get to the next level, whatever it might be. What are some ways that people that are listening to this as coaches or leaders, once again, can do to get that buy-in and to get them to be on the same page as you?
Well, I think it starts with knowing them. I was a high school teacher before I was a college coach. And one of the first things they teach you in your first education class is about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how you can't teach your kids if they don't feel safe and if they're not fed and valued. And so, first and foremost, you really have to get to know the people that you're coaching and or leading. And once you do that, I think you search for commonalities, because I do believe deeply, regardless of how a young person might be socialized I'm going to go to the NBA, or it doesn't matter how you play. It's just that you win. All those things that we hear that happen in sports doesn't really matter if they've been socialized in that direction. I really believe that at the core of human nature is somebody who wants to provide value,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be to another human being or to a cause, to the world. I think people want to be able to provide value. And so there's a commonality with every human being, regardless of what their journey has looked like. And as a coach, you have to find a way to connect with that.
Yeah.
And once you do, I think you let them experience what that feels like. And I'll explain that in a couple of ways. I was talking to someone the other day about our team serving, doing community service as a group, and I thought about it for a second. I don't remember ever one time taking a kid to any sort of community service, a Christmas dinner that we're feeding the homeless, Children's Hospital, Meals on Wheels, Mary Abbott House, Habitat for Humanity. Didn't matter what we were doing. I cannot recall one single moment in 25 years of this in which a kid did not appreciate, feel better, act better after they served.
Yeah.
It's just how that works. When you give to something outside of yourself, that's when you start to blossom. And so you want to put your student athletes or the people that you lead in situations where they can feel that, because it's addictive. It feels good, therefore it's addictive. So you put them in situations where they can experience that, and then they want more of it, and then it just becomes a contagion among your team. And it can be something as easy on a basketball court as pointing out a kid that is being terrific on the sideline while you're doing an inter-squad scrimmage, and popping it up on the video screen the next day and rewarding that kid for giving energy to the gym, even though they weren't on the floor actually participating live. You just start those things really, really small and then try to build on them, and they become contagions that actually glue your team together.
Love it. That's great. Hey, one other thing I want to talk about from your press conference. You were talking about the fire, and you described it via Garth Brooks song. Now, I'm not going to make you sing or anything, so don't worry.
Thank goodness.
But just tell me a little bit about that fire as a coach that you get into, that you described, and that you get to live into, if you will, and just describe that a little bit so people can try to understand it, maybe not relate to it, but maybe understand it a little bit more.
Well, Garth's hook of his song says, "Life is not tried, it is merely survived if you're standing outside the fire." And what he was talking about is living fully. And I don't know of another profession, and I don't want to, not dissing on anybody else's work. This is all I've done for my whole life, so it's all I know. But every day there's a score. Every single day you win and lose, whether you're playing a game or not. In practice, there is competition, and you come out getting an idea of how you did. You know, a lot of times if you have a business job, you work somewhere behind a desk, you go home at night. How do you know if you won or lost?
Yeah.
How do you know if you got better or you didn't? In sports, it's so in your face. And so when it's great, it's unbelievable. I mean, like, unbelievable. And when it's awful, it is awful. I mean, devastatingly awful. And when I look at it, it's just, well, okay, there's just hardly any time left in the lukewarm in the middle, which is awesome. Who wants to live in lukewarm? So yeah, maybe it's awful sometimes, but the other end of that is so incredible. You never have to wonder whether you're alive or not. You're feeling it all the time.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, losing it's miserable, right? I mean, it's amazing what it'll do to you, and winning is the best thing in the entire world. How were you able personally to stay grounded, and not get caught up in all that? Maybe there were instances, but for the most part, it seems like you were able to stay really grounded throughout it all. What was your secret when it came to that?
Lots of things. I think it begins with how I was raised in a small town in southern Oklahoma, where everybody, you work for everything you got, and you said yes, ma'am, and no, sir, and please and thank you, and you wrote thank you notes, and you went to church on Sunday. It was a way of life, and that's deeply embedded into my soul. The other thing is family. I've said many, many times, I was a much better coach because I was a mother. There is a perspective that comes from being a parent. It goes both ways. It helps you coach better, and I think it helped me parent. Coaching helped me parent better as well. It was a door that swung both ways. But I'll tell you, you come home in those early years when I was building the program, and we were terrible and just getting thrashed by people. I come home at the end of the day, and I had a brand new baby, 6-month-old. I had a 4-year-old son. And so we're doing baths and bedtime and bottles and laundry. And there wasn't time to sit around and worry about what anybody was saying about our program or wring my hands about our 1-loss record. I had stuff to do.
Yeah,
and so
right.
that life balanced everything out. It didn't allow my coaching process to take center stage. Now, it's a big part of my life, and my life was certainly weaved within it. But it never got to be the main thing. And that's because of family and a great husband and parents nearby and friends outside of the business. I think that's another way too, because we get so entrenched in the weeds while we're coaching, and we think such little things are such big things. And you tell them to somebody, and literally by the time it gets out of your mouth, when you're explaining it to someone who doesn't live that life, you're like starting to understand how bizarre it must sound. And so I think people who are in completely different professions outside of the sports world, having them as anchors, that was important. And then the last piece is having mentors in the business who've been there and done that, that I could look to for an example or for advice. Those truth tellers that we spoke of earlier.
Yeah, that's good. I remember, man, when our kids were young, there's nothing like rocking a baby after a loss, like it was like the best thing in the entire world.
Sets the world back up straight for sure.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And the parenting part really resonates with me too in coaching, because it's like before you yelled at kids and you didn't realize that was somebody's kid. But once you had a kid, you definitely knew. What's one thing you wish you would have known about coaching that you didn't know when you started, or just looking back in general?
I wish I'd known earlier how important it is to be a great question asker. Coaches are notorious tellers, and I was a good one. Put your elbow here, put your toe there, put your left thumb coming out of your ear in the passing lane. Tell. And I learned later in my coaching career how important it is to ask questions, not only for the stickiness of it. If you're called upon to think through a thing and supply an answer, you're more apt to remember it than if somebody tells you what that answer is and then you're asked to repeat it. If you have to search to find it, it's there. But it's not only that, it's the empowerment that gives to athletes to understand and actually apply. And I'm going to go on a little soapbox here, but I'll come back, Kevin. All right. I believe context is so incredibly important in everything, but in teaching basketball. And I probably figured that out a little late. It didn't take me as long as it did the question asking. But in other words, you run drills and you know that the purpose of this drill is to get better at your fast break. But you run it. You get really, 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 really good at running the drill. And you're just okay at your fast break because everything is different all the time. And so when players get to practice the thing in context, in other words, live play, whether it's 3-on-3 half the floor or 2-on-2 in the middle margin or whatever, that when context surrounds it, they're having to build these muscles to be able to adapt and apply and put what they've learned into actual play. I think the same thing is true mentally. If you're telling them all the time, they're really never having to search into the nuances of a thing. Why do you do that? When do you do that? Why do you not do that? When would you not do that? What tells you that? They're having to subconsciously go through all those things when you ask questions, which is beefing them up internally, if you will. And so I wish I had recognized that earlier, that there is power in questions. And, why do you not? Well, practice isn't as pretty. It doesn't move quite as well. You ask a question, you don't get an answer of any substance. You got to be pretty crafty at asking another one until you get it and get them thinking. And it doesn't always make contextual practices, don't always make for pretty practices. Somebody walks by the door, the ball's going to be flying around. It's going to look kind of ugly and junky. And as coaches, sometimes we don't want that. We want it to be pristine and we want to be praised for the organization and the fluidity of it. And that's not really what learning looks like. Learning's messy, and we got to be okay with letting it be messy.
That's really good. Like, I don't know, it took me 40 something years to ask good questions. That's why I have a podcast now, Coach. But What is the difference to you between just being able to ask questions or being able to ask the right questions, and how do you know?
Oh, I think it's hard. I think it's a nuanced skill that grows and grows the more you utilize it. But a big part of it, Kevin, is honestly just being aware and
Hmm.
allowing the moment to organically lead you to whatever happens next. If you got a group of kids in front of you in a gym and you ask a question and you're not getting any traction, you shift it just a little bit and find those traction points and then follow them, and they'll take you to the right spots. But it's not for the faint of heart. And I think for coaches to be good at that, they have to be really, really comfortable with some things they didn't see coming.
Yeah.
Sometimes we want to be super prepared and have all the answers. And I think we all figure out pretty quickly that we don't have all the answers, and that saying, I don't know, is fine. But to get answers that you weren't expecting, you got to be pretty sure of yourself to be able to take those and handle it and turn it into something really positive for the group.
Would this be along the same path? If I said, hey, you've got to go back and talk to 1996 version of Sherri Coale, what would you tell her? I mean, would you talk to her about these questions, or is there something else that comes to mind, before she steps into that role, or even taking it back farther if you need to? What would you say?
Oh, I think I would teach myself how to be better at those things that we just discussed, but I would also remind myself to not take things personally. I just think as coaches, we have a tendency to anoint ourselves as rulers of the universe, meaning I am responsible for everything, and that means every kid who doesn't get it,
Yep.
every kid who doesn't want to get it, along with maybe the ones who do. And as coaches, though, I think as a general rule, what we do way more than the other is we beat ourselves up when we lose, or when we don't get to a kid, or when we don't maximize potential. Coaches really don't, by and large, walk around beating their chest when they win. Typically, they give the credit to their team, but my goodness, we as a ex have a tendency to just beat ourselves with a cat of nine
Yep.
tails when it doesn't work, and that's a form of narcissism too. You're not
Yeah.
really responsible for everything.
Yeah, it's hard though. I would sometimes, like, if you've got 12 kids, I think it would bother me like when 10, 11, 12, they were just mad at me because they weren't playing, which I mean, I totally respect it, but like I felt like when I wasn't getting to them, it bothered me. Like I wanted to get to every one of them and have an impact on their lives, right? And so I totally get what you're saying there. What would you say to somebody listening that's getting ready to, they're walking into the situation, maybe similar to yours, but they got to build a program either way, and I mean, I look back and, the first year you win 5 games, 7 years later, you're in the championship game, and then boom, it's sustainability. What were some of the keys when you look back and say, hey, this is why we were able to build it the way we did, and these should be some of the non-negotiables for you as a leader of a business or a coach of a team?
Well, we can go right back to country music for that. Maren Morris has a song called Bones. The house don't fall when the bones are good. I think what you build your program on, and those non-negotiables that you're not going to budge on, those have to stick, and they have to every year be a priority. I think in other areas you have to be flexible. One of the one of my mentors, one of the best coaches I know, is Dan Hayes. He's the men's basketball coach, the retired men's basketball coach at Oklahoma Christian, which is where I played college ball. Coach's first year at OC was my first year. I was a freshman. He came in and was the leader of the men's program, and I got to watch him build that program and have remained close friends with him through the years. So that's since 1983. But I watched Coach go from staunch defensive minded strategy. I mean, they guarded people now. They spent half their practice on shell drill and man-to-man breakdowns and how they're covering on balls and all this stuff. And then the three-point line comes in, and different trends come through, and the way he played changed. More wide open, less time on defense, more time on transition. Not that he ever got away from dribbling, passing, catching, and shooting, fundamentals that make you successful, but his sort of strategic philosophy changed a little bit as the game changed and as players changed. No longer the prototype point guard. Had a long, lanky shooter running point guard. No longer the prototype big guy that you set at the block and make Duliak moves left and right. And more of a guy who would pick and pop and shoot the three. So he was willing to change in all those ways and sort of move along with the game. But there were certain things about how you're going to get on the floor after a loose ball and how you're going to represent this institution and how you're going to point to the guy who passed you the ball when you scored. Those things never changed. And so I think that's incredibly important for a new coach who's building a program. Know who you are, know what you're going to stand for and what you will not stand for, which may be even more important than the first, and stay consistent with those things. In other areas, allow yourself to be progressive and to change and to grow.
That's good. And would you add into that, regardless of what the record is, to not waver on some of those things that are your non-negotiables that you believe? Because I feel like some people, the second they start losing, they bail on what they believe in. And then I don't know if that goes back to what we talked about earlier, just knowing your voice, being self-aware to all that and just sticking to that. But there's a fine line then, I guess, with the flexibility of being able to change. Does that make sense when I'm asking there?
Yeah, it does. And I would say this, and I do feel like we're in a different time in terms of competitive athletics, but the odds are you could be fired tomorrow regardless. I mean, it's such, and then where are you? If you switch, if you give up on the things that really resonate in your soul and that make you who you are, if you fudge or stray from those things, and you're out anyway, where are you? What do you have? I mean, I just think, I boxed up my office in the spring, 25 years in the corner office of the Lloyd Noble Center. Trophies, plaques, awards, they're going in plastic bins to go in storage somewhere. Yep. If that's what it was for, wow, what a waste of time. What a colossal waste of time. So you've got to be able to feel really, really good about what you're doing and why you're doing it, regardless of what the outcome is, because that's the only thing that lasts.
I love it. I love that. Do you care to share a little bit about failure, whether that's maybe a certain incident, your biggest incident of failure, and just what you learned from it, or how you feel overall about it in terms of how you respond to it?
Oh, absolutely. Failure was a big deal with our program. We love to talk about failing because of the opportunities that it presented for success. Now, we didn't want to have to talk about it all day long every day because we wanted to succeed way more than we failed. But we didn't want to be afraid of it. We didn't want to shy away from it. And so it was everything from if I explained something in practice and then we went out and we did it very poorly, I'd fall down and do 10 push-ups right there and get back up and say, all right, that one's on me. Let me try this again. And that kind of thing just made it feel better to not be perfect all the time in our gym, to be okay with messing up sometimes. I think the greatest failures for me, it's not, there's not a game where I go, oh, we should have guarded that on ball differently, or I can't believe we lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament that year, or, whatever. Those are not, they may be considered by some as failures, but not really to me. To me, my failures are when a kid walked out of a meeting and didn't understand what I was trying to convey in the meeting. I failed as a communicator in that meeting. Many times if a player doesn't reach their maximum potential, man, I feel like a failure, that I wasn't able to help them reach their goals or reach them and gain the buy-in that our team needed. And I think as I got older, I learned how to step back with the assistance of others, but step back and look at the situation to learn and gain knowledge for future situations, to be better, to do better. But I think early in my career, I beat myself up for a long time, and didn't necessarily look for what could be learned from those. Was great about it on the court, man, we can't trap ball screens anymore because this, and this happens. But off the court, it was a little harder.
Mm-hmm. So on the flip side, how do you define success? And when I ask that question, I'd like to know, like, do you define it differently now that you did 5 years ago or 25 years ago? How do you go about that in your life? And I guess, and does that change now that you're coaching versus when you're not coaching?
No, I honestly, Kevin, don't think I do define it any differently. Um, I remember with my high school team when I was a high school coach, we had gotten beat in the state championship or state semifinals. Had the whole team back, and the next year we just weren't practicing with great fire early in the season. And I sent them to the locker room and said, "What's going on? If you're not going to do it full out, why should we even do it? Like, I mean, there's a way that you perform whether you win or not. We're good enough. We might win the whole thing if you just go through the motions, but that's not how we're going to do it. That's not how I'm wound. That's not what it's about. Success for me is not about us winning all our games. It's about us getting better every single day and doing it with every fiber of our being." So I had that then. But I think as I got older, I think I maybe processed it better. I think it's always been sort of the North Star, but I think I processed it all a little bit better. I think having kids does that for you too. You know, what is a win? A win is growth. A win is improvement. A win is understanding. And it's interesting because I think there's a tension there, you know, that you have to remain edgy. You have to do everything within your power to win in terms of an outcome, but you never want to sacrifice the real win, the one that matters, in order to get the outcome. And that's where the line gets a little hazy sometimes for folks.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Hey, I want to wrap up with a couple more before we get into 3-pointers. I'd love for you to talk about, I love these 10 questions that you've produced for self-reflection. You know, how did you come up with these, and just talk a little bit about the importance of self-awareness as a leader. I've talked on here before about self-awareness, situational awareness. You know, the great leaders seem to have a good beat on both, but how did those reflection questions help you, and kind of what is your process with those now in terms of self-awareness?
Well, first of all, I think when we are least self-aware is when we have no bandwidth. We are just maxed. And ironically, that's the time when self-awareness is most integral. So it's this crazy little irony that when you need it most is the time that it's hardest to get to. So I think the questions of self-reflection help that bandwidth have a buffer, if you will, so that you never get to the edge of it because you're continually sort of taking stock, sort of stepping back and looking at things to make sure that you're really living in the lane you want to be in and the way you want to live there. And I don't think it changes when your profession changes. I really don't. I mean, obviously the particulars do, but the basic questions of you know, how you're utilizing your time, and are you aware of how you're coming across to people and interacting with people, all of those things, they sort of just transfer to a different playing field, if you will.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Now, this next one, I want you to be completely honest with me. I want you to set aside humility. I don't want you to tell me it was awesome administration or it was amazing coaching staff or talented players. I want to know what made Sherri Coale so good at what she did.
Well, I have to throw the caveat in there. It's not lying to you. It was being surrounded by great people. There's no question. You don't do it alone. And no coach ever wins any games by themselves. Players win games, period. Players win games. So let's go with that first. It was the people I worked for, the people I worked with, and the people who played for me. That's how we were able to be so successful. But, you know, I had a former student athlete from another sport. I didn't coach her. At University of Oklahoma student athlete who's out in the business world, and she was at an event that I spoke at not long ago. And she asked me that question. couched in a little different terms, but her question was a woman in a man's world, as a female on such a big platform. How'd you do it? And I gave her an answer that was true, but it wasn't really at the heart of the matter. And I loved the question because it sat on me for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then I wrote her a note and said, here's the real answer, I think. And thank you for asking that question, because it really made me stop and look at things and grapple a little bit. And that's where we always learn. But I really believe it was being comfortable in my own skin.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was just really good with who I was, whatever, whether you liked it or you didn't, or it fit the norm or it didn't, or it was atypical or it wasn't, or because that allowed me or gave me the confidence to be whatever I needed to, or do, I should say, do whatever I needed to do in certain situations to make them positive. So, what goes along with that is I think when you're really comfortable, you're not continually offended. Like if there were lots of opportunities where I could have been offended as a woman by something someone said to me as if after a game or at a booster event or whatever. And I think I was able to make the choice not to be and to win those folks over because I was comfortable. And I think that confidence is the great, it's a great foundation for everybody who does anything worthwhile. You got to believe in who you are first.
Well, I love that. That's really, really good. Hey, what was it like for you too, just during your time there, being around you were around some great coaches just in that building. I mean, from Stoops to Kruger to, all these coaches, and all, I could go on and on. I mean, there was a ton of them. That had to be just like I always enjoyed like, hey, can I go get lunch with the football coach, the soccer coach, the volleyball coach? That always sharpened me. That had to be wonderful.
It was sort of fairy tale-ish when you think about it. I remember in 2002, Kelvin Sampson was the men's basketball coach, and they went to the Final Four. We went to the Final Four and then played in the championship game. And we felt like losers on our campus because the gymnastics teams had won their like 12th in a row national championship. So we're like, what is going to the Final Four even mean around here? But we'd go on caravans and these events where we go speak to boosters, and I spent a lot of time with Bob Stoops, and he was such a remarkable example for me of not taking himself too seriously. I mean, the football coach at Oklahoma is like, Moses or something. And he was always just very humble, and he was just real, and maybe not to the media, people who don't know him, but for everybody who was around him on a regular basis, he was so real and so legitimately enjoyed being a football coach. And I thought it was always inspirational to me, because I felt like when he quit enjoying being a football coach because he couldn't just be a football coach, he had to be so many other things as well. He just said, I'm done. I'm not going to do it if I'm not being happy. And so he was just a great example. But yeah, Patty Gasso, KJ Kindler, Kelvin, obviously, Jeff Capel, who's still a dear friend of mine, Lon Kruger, just great coaches everywhere. And it really is true. As the water rises, so do the boats. That stuff is contagious. When you're an athlete and you're sitting around the dining hall and you're sitting next to a guy who's getting ready to play in the National Football Playoff, and you're sitting next to a gymnast who has an Olympic gold medal, and you're not really gonna not go to the weight room and work hard,
Yeah. You expect that.
Yeah.
Hey, you seem like somebody that really likes books and movies. I know you mentioned movies, and I've heard you talk about the Whiplash, great movie. We talk about books on here. We usually don't talk about movies, so feel free to throw one out. But do you have some favorite books in general, or anything you're reading right now?
Oh my goodness, let's see. That's just one of the bookshelves that surrounds me in this room. Voracious reader. I don't even know where to start. I have so many favorites. The Inner Game of Tennis. I try to read it every year. Find something new every time I read it. That's definitely one. A Sense of Where You Are. John McAfee. That's just John McPhee. I'm sorry. It's just a beautiful book about basketball. If you love basketball, the intricacies of it. A writer who's writing about basketball is like my nirvana. Pat Conroy, My Losing Season, an amazing book. Again, an author who's writing about his biographical about his experience as a point guard at the Citadel. Yep. Those are a few right off the top of my head here.
Yeah, that's good. Those are good ones. The Inner Game of Tennis. That's a great one. That's deep. Nobody's mentioned that one. So
it's classic. Yeah. So good. Yeah. So good.
Yeah. It's
also anything by Tom Peters. I love all Tom Peters business stuff. The Pursuit of Wow. He has a way of saying things in a sticky manner where they stay with you.
Nice. Good. All right. Well, those are good ones. All right. Hey, we're going to go, it's rapid fire, but by all means, take your time here. I called 3 pointers and no doubt you'll go 3 for 3 here with your jumper, right? Number one, if people could learn one thing from this talk and just hold on to it, what would you want that one thing to be?
You told me I could take my time. I think it would be the fact that there needs to be a conversation that happens continuously in this world of high pressure, high expectation, great responsibility, which is coaching. Mm-hmm. There needs to be a continual conversation in your circle, in a big circle like this. We need to talk about it because it's hard. It's hard stuff, and it's hard on the people who are involved in it, and conversation helps.
Yeah, it's really good. Number 2, if you could have stepped into my shoes today and been behind the mic and asked Coach Coale a question, what question would have you asked her that I did not ask today?
These are the hardest rapid fires I've ever had, by the way. Usually they're like, what's your favorite color, blue or green? Yeah. Maybe what is a lesson that you learned from a mentor about what not to do?
Good. Okay. Good. What about finally, this is a pretty easy one, Coach. Good stuff's the name of us. Give us some good stuff maybe that you feel is appropriate here in closing before we dive into some of your stuff.
Well, I'll start with this. We are in such the middle of an information age right now, obviously, where it's just at our fingertips at all times. If you want to be progressing, learning, growing, you have to read every day. So you got to read something every single day. I hope people are reading. Doesn't have to be long. You don't have to do it for 2 hours, but you need to be putting new thoughts into your brain every single day, or at least stimulating your old thoughts every single day. The importance of journaling, of writing, to understand. Nobody has to read it. If you don't enjoy writing and you don't want to share it with anybody, that's fine. But the process of getting it down on paper is really clarifying for your mind. Yeah. And I think it's a good practice. And I think writing, like with an ink pen, is really important too. Research shows us that there's a connection to neurons, and we want to take we go to a seminar, we want to take a picture of it, right? We want to get the board, write it down, take notes when you're reading, take notes with a pencil. There's a physiological response that takes place and allows you to hang on to that. Write thank you notes. Goodness gracious, write them every day. I set aside time every single day to write a few. It makes a difference in people's lives, and not that many people do it anymore. It matters. You know it. I know it. We all have a box or a bulletin board or a drawer full of them. It matters. Yep. That's how you can impact people. So those are a few things off the top.
Those are great. Those are really good. All right, there you go, Coach. 3 for 3. See, it wasn't too bad. Hey, talk about where our listeners, before we get in your website once again, where are you at on social media if they want to follow you on there?
Well, I'm like the worst social media person ever. Like, I didn't even do any of it as a coach. very purposefully. But it's not my deal. And here I am on social. We're going to be on social media, but I have a website, sherricoale.com. And it's a place where you can contact me for speaking events or for consulting. And it's also where my weekly blog is posted. And the blog is called A Way of Life. It comes out every Tuesday morning. And if you sign up, you get a newsletter once a month for free. It has been truly just a little side hustle, labor of love. Obviously, it's all free. It's just given me an opportunity to be creative. I have long loved to write. Always knew that at some point when I finished with coaching that that's some way, shape, or form I wanted to write. It's my creative passion. So this has given me an outlet for that. And so I should be very thankful to technology that you can do this now, because 10, 15 years ago, there wasn't such a thing as that. And it's been really rewarding to, even if it just resonates with one person and gives them some insight or stimulates some thought or makes them do something a little bit differently, then it's served its purpose. So it's just been really, really fun and rewarding. So I'm on Twitter, but I'm not a very good tweeter. And I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm still trying to figure out how that works. But you can find my blog on my website. I do know how to upload that.
Oh, there you go. That's awesome. Well, hey, Coach, thanks so much for your time. I mean, I knew going into this, I was going to enjoy this conversation, and it's definitely exceeded. I mean, it's one thing to have the type of career you've had. It's just more impressive to me, who you are to the core and how you went about it. It's just so refreshing. So yeah, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I appreciate the time, and I love the artwork, the good stuff behind you. That's about as good as it gets right there.
Yeah, it is. That is. Well, hey, you enjoy retirement and spoil that granddaughter of yours. All right.
You know it. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah. Well, hey, everybody, thanks for listening. As always, reach out to me, goodstuffkevin@gmail.com. Send me your thoughts on Coach Coale. If you're looking for those questions I referred to earlier, maybe some of those other videos on what drives winning, let me know, and I'll send those to you as well. Thanks again. And until next time, good stuff.